Hello, everyone. Welcome to another installment of Virtual Math. I will be your host this morning. Last week we were talking, well, not last week, yesterday, we were talking about multiplying binomials. Well, basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be factoring trinomials, which is essentially undoing that multiplication. So we want to find the terms that were multiplied together to create an expression. So in this case, let's take a look at example 1. So basically we have x squared plus 11x plus 30. That came from multiplying two binomials together. The question is, what were those two binomials? And when I promised that the box would become really useful later, well, this is kind of where it really shines. So let's take a look. The big thing was when we were multiplying binomials, really, if we took the top right and bottom left terms, those really seem to stick around. So for example, let's look at our stuff from Tuesday. Notice how when I had x squared in the bottom left and plus 40 or plus 12 in the top right, both of those terms ended up being in the final trinomial. Same thing here, I had 2x squared and I had minus 5. Both of those terms ended up being in the final trinomial. I bring that up because if we take a look in this case, I'm betting that in our box we're going to have an x squared and a plus 30. So I'm going to throw those in their respective corners. All right, so now the question is, what goes on the outside? Well, the two things that multiply together to get us x squared are x to the first and x to the first. I'm just throwing the 1 on there just to emphasize when I do x times x, I really get x squared because I'm combining the exponents, but those aren't a necessary piece. So that was just a little note. You can scribble those out if you want to. With that said, I want to know what two things multiply to get me 30. Well, there's a few things. It could be 1 and 30. It could be 2 and 15. It could be 3 and 10. Or it could be 5 and 6. Really, I'm trying to look for some things that are going to get me this 11x now. So let's say I try 3 and 10. I think this one's going to work. So let's try it. Plus 3. Let's throw a plus 10 in. Well, if that's true, I'm going to do plus 10 times x, which will be plus 10x. And here, I'm going to do plus 3 times x to get plus 3x. So if I write all of that out, I get x squared plus 10x plus 3x plus 30. Well, now if I simplify, my middle term is going to be 13x. Well, now when I look, it's very close, but I should have gotten 11x, not 13x. So now I know that this is a failed set of factors. So I know that this one can't work. But then I'm starting to look, maybe that 5 and 6 will be better. So once again, creating my box, here's x squared, here's plus 30. And now x times x gets me x squared. And now I said I'm testing 5 and 6. So let's do plus 5 plus 6. X times a positive 5 is going to be positive 5x. And x times positive 6 is going to be positive 6x. That's looking pretty good to me. And let's just write it out to verify. And sure enough, 5x and 6x combine to get me 11x. This matches exactly what I want it to be, so I know that this is good. So now I know that these two things are my factors. So x plus 5 and x plus 6. So that is my final factored form. That's my answer. These two things had to multiply to get me this. That's what factoring is. All right, so these were all positives. The picture gets a little bit more complicated when I start to throw some negatives in. So once again, when I'm factoring this one, I'm looking for the two things that multiply. If I make my box, I know I'm going to have x squared, sorry for my terrible box, and a minus 20. All right, and I know the only possibilities to get me x squared are x and x. Now I'm thinking, what are factors of negative 20? Well, first off, I'm just going to do factors of 20. 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. However, now to figure this out, I know that one of the two factor pairs has to be negative in order to make all of this work. So if I look, the only ones I see, and this is how I think about it, the only ones I see that might get me 8x are 2 and 10. So I'm going to try a minus 2 and an x plus 10. If I do x times negative 2, I'm going to get negative 2x. X times positive 10, I'm going to get a positive 10x. If I write this all out, I get x squared minus 2x plus 10x minus 20. All right, and negative 2x plus 10x is going to be x squared plus 8x minus 20. I am so close, but notice how the middle sign is wrong. Well, if I'm this close and the middle side is wrong, or the middle sign, sorry, I know that I'm super close with this. So maybe this one didn't quite work, but I'm betting if I flip the positive and negatives, I'm going to get something that works perfectly. So x and x, and this time I'm proposing plus 2 and minus 10. So let's do our multiplication here. Multiplication. All right, this looks a lot more promising. Cool. So now notice how instead of a minus 2x, I have plus 2x, and I have a minus 10x instead of plus 10x. Those 2x minus 10x is going to be negative 8x minus 20. That's exactly what I want it to be. So here now are my two factors, so x plus 2 and x minus 10. So the thing with negatives is just be careful. Sometimes you get super close, but it's a sign difference, and that often just tells you swap which one's the plus, which one's the minus, and you're probably going to get something that checks out. All right, finally, something that gets a little bit more challenging is sometimes it's not just x squared, it's got a number in front of it. But same rules. I'm looking for those two things that multiply together. And still the same rules. It's going to be a 3x squared in here, and it's going to be a positive 9. All right, so here, normally it'd be x times x gets me x squared, which is still true, but I need to account for this 3. So one of these actually has to be a 3x. And just a reminder to people, when we see x all by itself, remember there's technically a 1 hanging out in front of it. And so that's why when I do 3x times 1x, 3 times 1 is 3, x times x is x squared. That's why that one works. Now the question is, factors of 9. This one's nice because there's only two pairs. There's 1 and 9, or there's 3 and 3. Now the question becomes, which one is going to match up here? So maybe I try, say I try 1 and 9. So let's try this. Maybe plus 1 down here and maybe plus 9 up here. So remember, we're experimenting. If it doesn't work, we'll try a different combo. All right. Actually, I'm going to change my mind here. I'm going to do plus 1 here. I'm going to do plus 9 here. Cool. So 1x times 1 is really just going to be positive 1x, or just plus x. That's up to you. 3x times positive 9 is going to be positive 27x. I'm sure some of you are looking and saying that doesn't work already. I'm just going to write it out to verify. All right, sure enough, that doesn't match. So, no good. Here's the tricky thing though. When we introduce this idea of this having a 3x, it turns out that order matters very much now. So just because having 9 down here and 1 up here didn't work, it doesn't mean 1 and 9 aren't possible factors. Instead of 9 down here and 1 up here, I'm going to flip-flop them. So I'm going to put plus 9 up here and plus 1 right here. Now I get 1x times 9. It's going to be positive 9x. And here I get 3x times positive 1. That's going to be positive 3x. So notice how just by switching these, because this is different than this, I get 2 different values inside. Oh. All right, so now that's looking pretty good to me. Combine my middle terms. There we have it. Sure enough, that matches what it's supposed to. I'm good to go. Here are my 2 factors. You could put in 1x plus 1, that would be fine. I'm just going to write it a little bit simpler and just write it as x plus 1. So there's no problem with making it 1x plus 1. That's totally up to you, but I prefer to keep it as simple as possible. So there's my factored form. And those are kind of 3 of the major types of factoring you're going to see. All positives with just an x squared but with some negatives, and then finally a number in front of x squared that isn't 1. All right, with that said, reach out if you have any questions, give the practice a try, and I think you'll do well.